No. Wait a minute. No, I do
you
not...
prefer the borrowing?
I do not want to stop borrowing like you've got a big axe that comes down, because the price you pay is astronomical.
Here's the question I was going to ask you.
And no politician will allow you to do it.
Here's the question I was going to ask you had I been permitted to continue my line of cross-examination. In the best of all worlds, wouldn't you prefer that the government lived within its means?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
But I am not living in cloud cuckoo land. I am a realist. Do not default on America's debt. Use the leverage which you've got.
Who are you talking about when you say cuckoo land?
To drastically cut our spending and borrowing requirements. We can do it. We have the leverage to do it. Don't throw it away.
They will never cut spending in this country, no matter who the president is, until it is illegal to borrow.
In the introduction to me, you quoted the very brave Rand Paul, did you not?
Yes.
He has a brave and bold idea about Social Security.
Yes, he does.
Raise the retirement
that is
age
something
and do it
you and
quickly.
I agree on.
Means test the benefits which you're putting out. It's
it's
a bold idea.
You think that I fully agree with him and you. Do you think there's the political will to do that? The Democrats will never go for that. It's their sacred cow. It's their third rail.
We do it. The House is the House not run by Republicans?
Well, it is run by people who call themselves Republicans, but they're prepared to let the president spend us into prosperity, like you want him to.
We should be supporting people like Rand Paul, who have a rational, long-term plan to deal with our entitlement programs. That is leverage. That is the way out of default.
Do the British balance their budgets?
They're trying to right now, actually.
And you think that they're not spending enough money?
No,
that might cause a recession.
I think no such thing. No such thing. What they're doing is the right thing. They are taking and absorbing pain and punishment. And I think it's a wonderful thing to see them have the guts to do it.
Varney, can I tell you how much I enjoy these tete-a-tetes on Friday?
This is a tete-a-tete?
This is wonderful. Stuart Varney, the show is called Varney and Company. It is the only show in the Western world that starts at 20 minutes after the hour, 9:20 in the morning Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We do this then. Stuart, it's a pleasure. Thank you. Coming up, a mother jailed for doing what all parents strive to do, give her child the best education possible. You got to hear this one. No, Varney's not in it. Why should the government get to decide what type of education your child gets? In Ohio, a parent was charged and convicted for sending her two daughters to a better school district. All right, she falsely used her father's address to get them out of a school ranked near the bottom of the state. In New Hampshire, a mother's religious beliefs are at the center of a court order forcing her to send her daughter to public school rather than to continue homeschooling her. Isn't a parent's right to choose what's best for his or her child? Isn't it a natural right? And isn't it the government education monopoly the reason public schools are so bad? With us now, my friend and host of Huckabee on the Fox News Channel, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Governor Mike, it's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
This Ohio case. The facts are pretty clear. A woman claims to be residing at her father's address because it's a better school district. She didn't steal any money. She didn't take anything that wasn't entitled to her. She ended up in jail because her two kids went to a neighboring school district. Would you have prosecuted her if you were the governor of Ohio as you were once the governor of Arkansas?
Absolutely not. In fact, the irony here is that if she had been an illegal immigrant, then she would have been completely able to send her kids. I mean, think about this for a minute. They say, well, she broke the law. People break the law all the time to better the life for their kids. The whole idea of the rationale behind the DREAM Act was to make sure that you don't punish these children. Look, I think that a parent ought to find the best opportunity for his or her children. That's what this mother was doing. I support her wholeheartedly. The answer is school choice. The answer is not to have the government throw some mother in jail. This is absurd.
It doesn't tell you where to buy shoes. It doesn't tell you you have to eat at restaurants in your school district. It doesn't tell you what shops to go to. Why can't we treat education like any other commodity on the market and let people purchase it where they want to rather than where the government tells them to?
Well, it works in the higher education system. You think about it. America's higher education system is the envy of the world.
Right.
Unfortunately, our K through 12 isn't. What's primarily different? You choose with your feet where you go to college. Right. You do not get to vote with your feet as to where your kids attend K through 12 unless you have enough money that you can afford to put them in a private school.
Well, we need that fundamental change. Governor, I thought of you when I read about this awful New Hampshire case. A state court judge, of which, as you know, I was once one in New Jersey, decided that this woman is too religious, too committed to the basic principles of Christianity to be trusted with teaching her child at home, and therefore the child must go to a public school? How draconian is that?
It is very draconian. First of all, homeschooling is a very legitimate option for parents, and it ought to be protected. The laws ought to do everything possible to say that the fundamental responsibility of government is to protect the rights of the parent, not to infringe upon them. Mothers and fathers will always raise better kids than governments ever will.
Of course.
And the idea that the mother is religious, the first question is, define religious by government standards. Secondly, how much religion is enough or too much?
I did not read a transcript of this trial, but it's inconceivable to me that a court could have compelled her to answer questions about her beliefs. The primary conveyor of values to children is the parents. In this case, it's a one-parent family. Who could do it better than the mother?
I mean, she wasn't teaching her daughter to bite off the heads of birds or doing something bizarre. The basic fundamental issue ought to be, is there anything endangering the child? Now, if believing in God endangers a child, then we've lost the country anyway. There you go.
Last question. We don't have much time left. There's this movement afoot for the federal government to do something to let states go bankrupt. Wow. When the federal government pays your bills, A, it comes with strings, and B, at some point that cash flow stops and you're left holding the bag.
I find that I'm a very lonely person here. I think it's a terrible precedent. If the states are able to go into bankruptcy, what it's really doing is creating a template that is going to come back and bite us, because it's saying not only can states and now the federal government, but individuals run up your bills, do whatever you want, and then let somebody else pay for it. It is a very bad precedent.
If I watch you this weekend, as I do almost every weekend, with whom will I see you?
You're going to see me having a conversation with the Motor City madman Ted Nugent.
Oh, what a great guy.
It's worth watching.
And will Josh be in the band?
No, we don't let him in. But we also have Frank Caliendo going to do a little Super Bowl fun. It'll be great.
Josh is our favorite stage manager. Governor Mike Huckabee, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. And now a few items from our Freedom File. Guess what the Congress is buying for $3 billion and the Defense Department says it doesn't want or need? A jet engine for the J-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Why? Because the military already has a different engine in that aircraft that's perfectly fine, according to Defense Secretary Bob Gates. You heard correctly. The military already has an engine for the J-35, and somehow General Electric, of all companies, has a contract to build an unneeded extra one. America, how long are we ever going to find out about government spending when Congress just keeps spending on military hardware that the Defense Department doesn't want? This keeps happening over and over. When it happens again, you'll see it here on Freedom Watch. Doris Muller of West Peoria, Illinois, was bitten in her own house by her own dog. As a result, an animal control agent showed up at her door and seized the dog, forcing it to submit to a rabies test. That means that the dog must be confined by a vet at Mrs. Muller's expense for 10 days. If the dog doesn't die, it doesn't have rabies. Where does the state get the authority to demand that you hand over your dog for a rabies test when you live with the dog and you know it doesn't have the disease? It's your dog. You know if it has rabies. This is state nannyism run crazy. Had she told the government to back off, it would have been forced to obtain a search warrant, which no judge would have granted. America, stand up for your constitutional rights. And while on the subject of dogs, some small justice for Berwyn Heights, Maryland Mayor Che Calvo, whose dogs were murdered in an outrageous SWAT team invasion in 2008. Mayor Calvo just settled his lawsuit with the Prince George's County Police for an undisclosed sum. The suit was over an incident where officers intercepted a package of marijuana that was mistakenly delivered to the mayor's home, and then they violently raided his home, killed his dog, manhandled him, detained him and his family. America, these types of violent police raids are alarmingly common, and we must continue to be outraged by them. Otherwise, the violence will continue. Do all your rights go out the window when you enter an airport? One courageous man said no, and he fought back against the TSA goons, and he taped it. He and his tapes are here next. Here's a little bit of good news tonight. A New Mexico court dismissed all charges against Phil Mosick, who videotaped a TSA encounter at an airport. Why were the charges dismissed? Because what he was doing wasn't against the law, but that didn't stop the government's agents from arresting and charging him. Watch as Phil's recording shows he knew the laws better than the people who are supposed to enforce them. Here is Phil filming at a TSA checkpoint.
I plan to comply with all their rules. I do not believe that there is a rule that bars me from using a camera in publicly accessible areas of the airport.
This is a federal checkpoint. You can't do it here.
I've checked into it, and I know that I can do it here.
Well, you can be arrested, then you can check into it more.
TSA agents demanded to see Mosik's identification.
I'm going to need your ID now.
I don't have any ID to show you.
Sir, we're going to arrest you for concealing identity.
Am I required to?
Yes, you are now part of an investigation, a criminal investigation. You are required to give us your ID.
What am I being investigated for?
For disturbing the peace.
Disturbing the peace. A brave man to stand up to the goons at the TSA. With us now, the man who shot that video, Phil Mosik. Phil, welcome to Freedom Watch. All right, give us the picture.
Hello, Judge.
You are of the view, and rightly so, that there's no federal law that requires you to identify yourself. You don't need permission to travel from point A to point B in the United States. You're confronted by the goons in the TSA. What did they do to you?
Well, we shouldn't need to identify ourselves to travel from one state to another. I went into the airport with a boarding pass, and I handed it to the TSA document checker as I'm required to, and they started some alternative process. I got out my camera. I wanted to document what was happening, and you never know what will happen with TSA, and they didn't like that. The police were called over, and within a few minutes, I was arrested and I was put in jail. And I was charged with resisting arrest, with trespassing, with failure to obey lawful order of an officer, and with concealing identity.
And all of this happened because you recorded the officers of the government behaving in a public place, and because you declined to produce for them a government-issued ID. Is that right?
It seems to be. We don't know. It's hard to tell exactly why they arrested me, but those two things were what set everyone off.
All right.
When the TSA security guard first spoke with the police officer, with his supervisor, he explained that I was photographing the process and that I was refusing to show ID.
Did you have an ID on you at the time?
I did not have ID to show them. People lose their ID all the time. People show up at the airport with identification that's been stolen or misplaced, and TSA has a process. They have a process in place. They knew that, and they had begun this process, but it seems that they didn't like it.
All right.
We really should not have to. This identification process allows our government to say who gets to travel and who doesn't.
Right.
It's not so much the act of pulling this card out of your wallet that's troublesome. It's the idea that I have to go up and request permission and wait for a permission to proceed from one state to another in the United States.
And you know that Janet Napolitano, who we call on this show Cousin Janet, even though, of course, there's no relationship of which I'm aware, has actually begun doing this at various train stations and bus stations throughout the country. So this show me your papers in order to travel at the airports is probably just the tip of the iceberg of what will come if the government is not restrained.
It seems the TSA would like that to spread to other modes of transit, yes.
All right. What happened when this case went to court? Because the government, after it arrested you, actually literally charged you and prosecuted you, didn't they?
Yes. It took almost 14 months. This was in November of 2009, and my trial was last week.
What's the outcome of the trial? What did the judge do?
The judge did a very good job. The jury acquitted me of all charges. They looked at the evidence. The best evidence we had was the videotape that I made, and they found that I wasn't guilty. And you know, if I hadn't made that video, it's very likely that I would have been convicted of things that I did not do.
That
it's very
is
important
so,
for us to be able to
so
record
key.
the actions of our public employees.
That is so key, Phil, that you filmed what the government goons did, and a jury of 12 Americans looking at it decided this is not the way we want the government to treat people in this country. Phil, you're a hero to the freedom of travel. Thank you very much for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thanks for having me on.
Up next, defense hawks on the right are griping about defense spending cuts. But get this, even with the cuts, the defense budget would be vastly more expensive than during the Bush years and even during the Cold War years. My freedom fighters are on this one next.